Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today I am starting a book diary for The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So usually when we start my book diaries, we're in a little bit more of a professional setting, but essentially I started this and I was like, I'll just make a note of what I'm thinking and then I'll start the book diary later. But that didn't happen and now I have things that I really want to discuss with you. So we're starting now in my pajamas, at a funny angle with weird lighting, and we're just gonna roll with it. So first up, if you have never watched one of my book diaries before, this is a spoilery reaction vlog as I read this book. When I have anything of note to say, I will vlog my thoughts. There is no non-spoiler section, so if you have not read this book and you don't want to be spoiled, I would advise that you don't watch this video. I've been describing The Poppy War as a grimdark fantasy that centres around the historical event of the rape of Nanking, set in a fantasy world, which is not entirely accurate. I was doing some research on this because I literally know nothing about the actual event of the rape of Nanking. Forgive me if I'm wrong in the way that I say this. I looked up a few reviews on Goodreads and I read Ashley's review from Don't Have a Degree in Reading. She's like a huge fantasy buff and I really love her for like her epic and adult and high fantasy recommendations. She knows a lot about history as well, and she said that this book is set on the Second Sino-Japanese War. I think it's called Sino-Japanese War. Like I said, I don't know anything about Japanese history or Chinese history. It's not something that we're taught in school in the UK, and I never pursued history to a higher level, so I don't know anything about like East Asian history. But it is based on that, and I also read an interview by R.F. Kuang because I wanted to know how it was centered on the rape of Nanking, just so that I could try and be aware, because I feel like if you do know about the historical aspects, then you can see how it relates to that. And I believe that there is one chapter in this book that focuses on that massacre, and so it's not really centered around that. It's just the massacre is contained within the book. So this follows a girl called Rin who grew up in a rundown southern province of this country, which I am assuming is a country that is based on part of China. She is a war orphan and is being raised by foster parents who don't really like her. They use her for free labor in their shop, and they're also opium smugglers. In this world, there is this test that anyone can take, and if you score really highly, you can be entered into these academies that will train you in certain areas. Her foster parents want to marry her off to this merchant guy. He's like an imports dealer. She says, look, I'm gonna try and get into this school, just give me 2 years. If I don't get in, I'll marry this guy, whatever. So she gets into the school and she gets into the military academy, which is the only one that you don't have to pay for because it's like the best one. They give you free tutelage. She gets in there, and where I'm up to, that's where she is. So that's probably a more accurate description of this. Now, everybody has been saying about how many trigger warnings this book has. It's really dark. There's a lot of fucked up shit happening. So I thought this is going to be a real dense, gritty kind of fantasy. I don't want to compare it to Storm Dancer because that was a worry that I would have, but I feel like the atmosphere of Storm Dancer and more of a complex and dense writing style is what I expected. But first up, this book is extremely accessible in the language. It's not dense at all, and it's not like a contemporary writing style as such. I would say it's a young adult fantasy writing style. It doesn't read like an adult fantasy, it reads like young adult. So that is the first thing that shocked me, and I'm not sure how I felt about it because I expected something that was more dense and darker, and that's not how it feels in the writing style. The subject matter, which I will discuss what I've just read in a minute, is completely different. I don't like to say things like it's a case of telling and not showing unless I can like definitely 100% back up that, but I would consider it a little bit info dumpy. You learn the majority of the history of the country and the fantasy world through the history lessons at the academy, which, is that a lazy way of world building? Maybe a little bit. To have it so that you are present in the lesson with the main character and learning about things. There are more creative ways to build the world than that. I will also say that I'm pretty sure that I have not read a description of a place in this book apart from the academy, which has pagodas and like a courtyard was described, and I think a temple has been described, but I don't really have a good picture of the world. And because it's a very like more modern young adult fantasy, almost contemporary writing style, I'm finding it hard to correlate it to any kind of picture in my mind. So it's throwing me a little bit, and I don't feel like I'm fully immersed in the world. However, I am fully immersed in the story. So a couple of things. The first thing is what Master John said to her. He is the military training guy. There's like 6 masters, and they each teach a particular art or skill. Master John, which is Yun, yeah, probably Master Yun, that sounds much better than Jun, told her that she was pathetic and he hated students like her, and that they skip into the academy from tiny villages and think that they've made it, but they're not welcome there, essentially, which was a real shitty thing for a teacher to say to somebody. So I was a little bit shocked by that. That was like harsh. It was very, very harsh. The second thing that I've just read that I had to update you on is the dissolving of the main character's womb, essentially. She has her first period. She doesn't know what it is, which I feel like she should, because she said like there's no sex education where she's from. But also right at the beginning of the book, when her foster parents were trying to sell her to this merchant guy, they mentioned that she was past her first bleed, and the main character never questioned like, oh, what's the first bleed? So I feel like she should know what a period is. And anyway, she had her first period and she was like, I can't be missing this many lessons because of cramps. So she went to the infirmary and she had her womb dissolved, which is horrific. And I don't know if that's a thing that existed, like this potion that pretty much eats away at your womb, because like I said, know nothing about history. It's just not ever something I've been able to retain, and I think it's all the like names and dates and things like that. I also think that British history isn't very interesting, and so I've never taken a particular interest in history, because the history that we learn about is predominantly British history, and aside from things like World War II, it's mainly just kings and queens and listing off an endless reel of Elizabeths and Richards and Henrys and trying to remember what order they came in and how they died, and it's just really boring. So that's why I've never had an interest in history. But anyway, back to the book. I'm enjoying the storyline. I'm enjoying the characters. The writing style I'm iffy about. I don't feel like there's enough atmosphere. Current predictions is that I'm going to give this book 4 stars, because there must be a reason that everybody loves it. And I'm guessing it gets really good, especially towards like the climax in the end, I'm assuming. But that's just like how I'm feeling right now. If this book ended right now, I would give it 4 stars. So I feel like you can really tell that this book is by a debut author. And there have been some instances, I didn't mention it in my like introduction clip, but right at the beginning she's talking about her Auntie Fang and how Auntie Fang beats her, and you don't want to get on Auntie Fang's bad side because she's a horrible, horrible woman and really doesn't like Rin. And then a few pages later, Rin's like begging her to not make her marry this guy and just to give her 2 years to pass the exam to get into Sign Guard. And Auntie Fang's like, alright, if you must. And I'm like, if Auntie Fang was so bad, she wouldn't be able to be reasoned with. But anyway, that was just one of the examples of being able to tell that this is a debut author. I've had a few issues with the writing. Like, I feel like the characterization of the characters, obviously, doesn't feel like it fits the culture, the period, the theme of this book. There's quite a disjoint between the themes and the topics and the storyline and the characterization and the writing. It kind of reads like a young adult, and I don't mean that in like it's juvenile or it's childish. I mean that it's not as dense as I generally expect when I hear adult fantasy, and it's not one of those books that's categorized as both. Like Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor is categorized as young adult in the US and it's adult in the UK, but this book is like solidly adult, like across the board. Very dark themes, very dark topics, so it's like solidly categorized as adult, but it's written in a very young adult style. I've just come across a sentence that I thought I would share with you because it's bad and I don't know how it made it through entrance. But it's a bad sentence and I don't know how it made it through editing. Kite has taken Rin to the place where there's shadow puppetry, and he says, have you ever seen shadow puppetry? And there's this line that says, a line of children stood at the entrance doling out copper shells for entrance. It's a little bit It's a little bit overkill on the word entrance, isn't it? This is what I meant when I said I feel like it's going to be a 4 stars, because the story itself is very compelling and it's very easy to read. The language is very accessible, so I'm reading it very, very quickly, a lot faster than I thought I would. I'm enjoying the story, it's intriguing, it's holding my interest. I want to see what's going to happen, because with this being a debut novel, the first in a series, I don't really have much of an idea what's going to happen. But there are just things with the writing that I just could not rate it 5 stars, even if I get to the end and I think it's absolutely phenomenal. Like, there's enough things about the writing that would automatically decrease the star. And I don't know whether I'm necessarily being picky about not liking the writing style, because I feel like that could also have something to do with my expectations of the book going in not meeting the actual reality of the book, in which case that's my fault for expecting it to be like really dense and full of world building when it never was that. That's just what I had imagined in my head from everybody saying like this is the best adult fantasy of the year. But I don't want you to think that this clip is me saying that I hate the book or like I think it's bad. It's just things that I have noticed that mean that it isn't going to be a 5-star read for me. This is just a quick little update to let you know a theory, and I think that of the 3 rulers there was the Dragon Emperor, the Viperess, who is now the Empress, and the Gatekeeper, and I think that the Gatekeeper might be Instructor Yang, because when this assassin guy died, it says that the Gatekeeper felt it, and he wasn't alive. He was encased in something mortal but not quite mortal himself, and he didn't remember a lot of what had happened to him. And I know that Rin questioned Instructor Yang about him apparently fighting in a war, and he said he couldn't remember whether he had or not. So that's my theory. Please excuse my hair because I'm setting my curls for tomorrow, but I'm in section 2 of the book now, where the Federation has started to invade Nicara and they've broken into the capital and they're butchering everybody essentially. And Rin and Nezha, I wish I could pronounce all of these names, but they're fighting together, and he was a dick for the first part of the book and I thought they'd have like a huge rivalry, but now they're fighting together and they work really well together because they've spent so much time obsessing about each other and studying each other's attacks that they know that each other's weaknesses and strengths. And I'm like, if this is a hate to love now, I'm down for it. Well, my excitement over an enemies to lovers trope was short-lived because I think he's dead, so there'll be no more of that, unfortunately. I was right about Yang being the Gatekeeper, however now I'm really confused because Yun has just said that his seal is breaking and he's a bigger threat than the Federation, but I thought he was one of the 3 warriors that like won the war for them back in the day, and the Empress said that he's been dealt with, and I thought that they were like friends as such. So I'm confused about that, but at least my theory about him being the Gatekeeper proved to be correct. I am on page 100 and that's not true. I'm on page like 345. I'm up to chapter 17, and the Federation of Mugen has just blown up like half of the town that they're currently in, and like I'm like 2 chapters past that now. And Nezha, yeah, whatever, and he just turned back up and he's alive and he's not paralyzed, which is good because we left him in a bit of a precarious position. So I'm enjoying this still. I still find the storyline really compelling. I know I've complained about the writing style and I still like don't think it fits the tone of the book, but it's keeping me motivated to read. The chapters can be really long. They can be anything from like 15, which is like a normal size chapter to me, up to like 35 pages. But like I'm not really struggling to read them unless they are like the really long chapters, and then I'm a little bit like sluggish. So the story is still compelling me. I don't really know what to expect from, I'm way into the last half now. I'm like 70 pages over the border going into the last half, and I'm not really sure what to expect. I think I read that chapter 1 is the Rape of Nanking chapter, so I know it's going to get worse up until like at least then. But the magic system in this, I'm not sure how I feel about it. So we have like the shamans and they get high to commune with the gods, and then they draw the god's power into them. I got to admit, I know next to nothing about shamanism, so I don't know how well that reflects the actual principles and teachings of shamanism. It's not my favourite magic system because I don't fully understand it, which is in line with Rin, the main character, who also doesn't really have a clue about it. But I like my magic systems to be really well developed, and I like them to have like rules, and it seems to kind of be in this, like, you commune with the gods, you draw them into you, and they fight on your behalf, and it could go well, it could go badly, and you could lose your mind, and that's not like a structure to my magic system. So I'm not sure how I really feel about that, but the book is enjoyable and everything still stands from the last time I updated. So I'm now to the point where Rin and Alton have been captured by Mugen and are in the facility where they're going to be experimented on, I assume. Like, I don't know for sure that they are, but that's where Alton was before, so I'm guessing that's the deal. So Neza is dead, apparently, and I just didn't care, and I liked Neza. Like, as you guys know from when I was like, if this is a hate to love, then I am down. And yeah, I really liked him, and he's dead. And I don't care, which makes me believe that he isn't dead. Because this book is so brutal, there's so many points where emotional impact could be woven into the story, and I'm just not feeling it. Like, I'm enjoying the story, I enjoy the plot, I'm reading it really quickly, I'm absorbed, I'm engaged, but I don't care. And there's a disconnect between me and the writing, and I don't know how. Like, I can't pinpoint why, but I wish that it didn't exist, because like I said, I'm really enjoying the story. I just can't connect to the characters in it. I read the chapter that is centered on the rape of Nanking, and that was, I wouldn't say it's difficult to read for me personally, because I'm desensitized to a lot of things, but it was grim, it was graphic, and they make a valid point in the book. It's like, why would you be so cruel to boil babies alive, and just like unnecessary cruelty? And the fact that this was like a real historical event is like absolutely horrific. So I understand why that chapter does contain all of the trigger warnings. It's got to the point now where there's so many that like I just can't list them all off. But yeah, that one was like, it was a little bit difficult. It does work well in the line of the story. Like I said before, this book follows the Second Sino-Japanese War and also contains the rape of Nanking, both the things that actually happened in history. And I do like that they are woven into a fantasy setting. I know that I've said, I'm not sure if I said in the book diary, but definitely in one of my weekly reading vlogs, I said that I struggle with this book because it isn't rooted in any point in human history. Like, I can't really place it in a time zone because it feels like quite a traditional medieval type fantasy. The events that it's based on are 20th century, and the characters don't speak like they're rooted in any time period apart from just like general modern day America. But I do appreciate the following of the historical events in a fantasy setting. So like I said, traditional medieval fantasy, but with modern, or reasonably modern, it's in the last 100 years, events woven in there, and I do think that that is really well done. So I wrapped up the Poppy War earlier today, and I'm gonna go with 4 stars. I did like the ending. I thought the ending was really good, and I'm definitely going to be picking up the sequel. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I think I've covered most of my criticisms in this book diary of the reasons why I have detracted that 1 star. I feel like there's a lack of world building in here. It's not glaringly obvious, but if I did like a deep dive, I feel like I could pick apart the bits that don't really make sense or just could be developed further. I know I mentioned that I felt like there was a disconnect between me and the characters, and I do feel like that is because, as I said earlier, there is very little descriptions of places in here, and the characters, because they are so vague and like their language is modernized, they are transferable to any fantasy world or any other setting, any place in time. You could put these characters into any story, and because of that, combined with the lack of descriptions of places in this, I struggled a lot to have a mental picture in my mind. So like they were just floating around in like a void in my mind, and I feel like that really hampered my connection with the characters, and that's a big part of why this wasn't like amazing and absolutely blew me away. That being said, it is a very good book. I think that the story has a lot of potential. I feel like the author has a lot of potential. I wouldn't, a lot of people have been saying it's the best fantasy of 2018 and I would disagree. But it is really good and I did really enjoy it. The only thing I haven't really covered that happened that I wanted to touch upon is that I didn't, like I said, disconnect with the characters. I didn't really care when Alton died. I mean, yeah. There was one point in the book where she said that she loved him. And I'm like, do you? Like, I don't feel it. I don't feel any bond between you. I feel nothing. You're just like, he's your commander. You're a soldier. Was feeling nothing. Like, I know he's hot, but that's pretty much all I got from it. So yeah, like I wasn't affected by that. But yeah, that's all I have to say on this one. I'm glad that I finally read it and I will be reading the sequel. What I will say about those though is that I won't be running out to purchase my own copies in hardback. I will probably buy a paperback of The Poppy War when that's released in paperback and get the Dragon Republic from the library if they have it. So that's it for my book diary on The Poppy War. Please let me know what you thought of this book. I know a lot of you really loved it and I did enjoy it. I just didn't love it, you know? So please don't forget to like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. And if you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. And I don't normally do full video endings in vlogs, but that's it from me today. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.